newspapers. And what got most of those people in trouble, those who are in trouble? I believe it's money, sex, and power. Because they weren't used as God intended them to be used. Now some of the people were offended by Jesus. Can you imagine being offended by Jesus? Well, I always hear people say, well, if Jesus would come into the we would welcome him, we would have a coffee hour and donuts, and would we? Would we? Remember Roland Baden's famous Christmas story? When he said, boy, people say if Jesus would have come to the inn, I would have said there's no room for the inn. I would have welcomed him. What did Roland Baden say in that great sermon for Christmas? Really? You would have welcomed Jesus? Come on, if you want to welcome Jesus, then take care of the poor. Take care of the needy. Take care of the vulnerable. That's the way you welcome Jesus. Now some are offended. What did Jesus say? Well, Jesus said, there are many widows here in Israel. And Elijah went to help a foreigner, the widow of Zarephath. Wow. Why did Jesus do that? All these widows in Israel, and he goes to a foreigner. And then Jesus says, well, remember there are many lepers in Israel. And Elijah went to heal Naaman, who was a foreigner from Syria. Wow. The crowd was enraged. They led him out of the city. They took him to a cliff. And they attempted to kill him. Wonder Sweet reminds us of why this was disturbing news to the people. It was scandalous, an abomination, to say that God loves others besides, the people in his day. He loved the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, as well as those in Nazareth. Jesus' life was scandalous to some. Well, what did he do? He recruited disciples from smelly fishermen. Come on, Jesus, you can do better than those smelly fishermen. He dined with despised tax collectors. Can you imagine a politician today dining with tax collectors and sinners? He associated with lepers. You don't associate with a leper. You put them in a colony and you say, unclean. When they come down the street, you go on the other side. Jesus associated with lepers, the social outcasts. He even gave advice to adulterers. Oh, that wonderful story. Remember? Oh, when they caught that woman in adultery and they were all set to stone her because that's what considered the law. They all picked up their rocks and they were ready to throw it at this woman who was caught in adultery. Jesus went over and I didn't see Jesus picking up a rock. What did he say? Okay, guys, whoever is without sin, whoever's the first, you throw the first rock, you are without sin. What they do, they all dropped their rocks and they went home. And Jesus dropped his rock and said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. What a powerful story. There's so many powerful stories in the gospel, and somehow I think we've heard them so many times that they sort of fall on deaf ears. Wow. Jesus could have told them what they wanted to hear, but he didn't. He didn't. He spoke the truth in love. He told them how God's love was an inclusive love, reaching out to all. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. What a beautiful hymn that is. I hope we really mean it. I hope we really mean it. I was in one congregation once, and a visitor walked in, and all the people, looked at each other. Who's that? Who's that? Who's that? I thought to myself, who's that? That's a visitor. Why don't you go and greet them and welcome them and share the peace of the Lord with them? But it really got people unnerved and upset because someone walked in they didn't know. My goodness. All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. Now, if Jesus had George Gallup living in his day, and George Gallup got his crew out to take a poll, do you realize how low Jesus' numbers would be? They would even be lower than the U.S. Congress. They would be at 2%. Now, I'm not getting political, please. 2%. That's where Jesus was. Why, my friends, he was lower than 7 other gods and the Vestal virgins. They had more popularity than Jesus did. One of my favorite humorists is Harry Golden, a Jewish humorist who wrote way back in, 1902 or something like that. He wrote Only in American for 2 cents plain. If you want to read something very hilarious, read Harry Golden. He's a wonderful, wonderful humorist. And Harry Golden said that Jesus' popularity, when it came to the days of the Apostle Paul, if Paul had looked at a poll in his day, he would have noticed that Jesus was at 2% less than the 7 other guys and even the Vestal virgins. I don't want to give a sermon on the Vestal virgins, but I think you can guess who they were. Well, the Apostle Paul knew Jesus was low in popularity, but he didn't believe in those polls. He took the message of Jesus and turned the whole Roman Empire upside down. Wow. Wow. Paul was passionate. Paul was sort of obsessed with taking this Jesus story all over the Roman Empire. I saw a movie last week. It was about another woman who was obsessed. Another woman who was possessed with a real goal in her life. And maybe you've seen the movie, Zero Dark 30. It's the story of the capture and the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now, if you can handle a half hour of torture, or what they call enhanced interrogation, it's an excellent movie. And the movie shows how this one woman in the CIA, it was her first assignment. She just joined the CIA. Now, I don't know if this is the movie now. I guess it has some truth to it. She just joined the CIA. This was her first case. The Osama bin Laden case. It took him a decade, as you know. And she was just obsessed with it. And her boss would often say, maybe you ought to take another case and settle down. No, she said, we got this and that and that. Oh, man, it's a beautiful movie, really. And she wouldn't give up. But finally, as we know, it happened. Osama bin Laden was captured and killed. And the end of the movie has her getting on a plane. A plane that holds, I don't know how many troops. A huge troop transport plane. She's all by herself. And the pilot said, here, sit any place you want because this plane is just for you. And she sat down after it was all over. And he said, where do you want to go? And she didn't answer. That was the end of the movie. Wow. This one woman, possessed, obsessed with capturing Osama bin Laden. And look what happened. Now, we have great poll watchers on every day people say, you have to believe this because the poll says this. It drove me crazy, especially during the political campaign. You had to accept this person because the poll said so. Well, remember those Republican primaries? It wasn't too long ago. The poll said Michelle Bachmann was going to be the candidate for the Republican Party. And then a little while later, it was Newt Gingrich rose to the top. Remember these days? And a little while later, it was Rick Perry. Then a little later, it was Rick Santorum. And finally, Mitt Romney. And then, of course, one pollster said that Romney would win by a landslide. Well, we know how that turned out. Polls should not determine how we act, what we believe, and how we feel. Well, there are polls out today saying that the future of the church is in jeopardy. Just because church membership is down and just because worship attendance is down, that doesn't mean the church is over. In fact, now people are saying maybe there's going to be a revival of the church. Or it may take different forms, just as it's been doing the last decade. But we know there is a future. And I, for one, know that I believe with all my heart that the church has a great message to proclaim and to live out. Oh yes, the church has many faults and failures. Every time someone came to me in my ministry and said, Pastor, and they would list some failure of the church. And I would say, well, when you're through, I can add a few more than that. You think you've got the faults and you've got the failures, anything to hear me out. With all its faults and failures, I believe that the church is still the best avenue of bringing hope and meaning and purpose to a world that's crying out for help. That's a big out today, my friends. The world is crying out for help. And they go anywhere they can for that help. I still look to the prophets and the apostles